Welcome back to my channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. I'm glad you're here. Instead of going for my normal walk and talk tonight, I figured I'd sit down and talk to you about a few things that I noticed when I was reading my email from a manufacturing newsletter that I keep up with so that I can keep up with the industry that I work in, which is manufacturing. But the food manufacturing stuff comes across there too, even though I'm not involved in food manufacturing. But I wanted to share some of these articles that I've been looking at with you, because these articles typically are talking about the cutting edge of what they're working on in any manufacturing field. And some of these leave a little bit of room for concern, to say the least. So let's take a look at them. Okay, in this first article entitled "Americans Throw Out $218 billion in Food Annually. Label standardization could help." I'm not so sure that label standardization would make a terrible dent in the amount of food that people waste. One of the things I've noticed since I've been doing this diet is that the food that my wife and kids continue to eat long after I started very often winds up getting thrown out, because they make a lot at once and eat a good meal, but then leave some leftovers in the refrigerator that sit too long, and then they get mold and fungus on them or whatever. It looks like it's got hair growing in it. That never happens with meat. I'm telling you that, with me anyway, because I eat my meat long before it ever gets a chance to get there. I hardly ever have any leftovers. It's very rare that I make too much to eat. And even if I do, I still usually eat it. But I have been amazed at how much food we throw out. And it has a lot more to do with the fact that we're not really buying food. Because when you start spending your money on good quality food, you become conscious of how much you're spending on it. And when you buy meat like I do, you become real conscious of how much you're spending on it. So I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause waste to be there. So to me, doing a carnivore style diet will really help with food waste, especially in your own house. But let's see what their solutions are. If you've ever thrown away a half-consumed carton of milk or an unopened packet of chicken, after a quick glance at the date on the package, there's a chance that you've unnecessarily contributed to America's growing food waste problem. Americans throw out between 30 to 40% of their purchased food annually, and according to the nonprofit organization Feeding America, Americans waste more than $218 billion each year on food. Most of this is genuinely beyond its use-by date or unsafe-to-eat date, but the FDA estimates that 20% of food waste is thrown out due to consumer confusion over date labeling. In a 2019 letter to the food industry, FDA Deputy Commissioner Frank Yanas wrote, "The FDA has found that food waste by consumers may often result from fears about food safety caused by misunderstanding what the introductory phases on product date labels mean, along with uncertainty about storage of perishable foods." The root of the issue, the problem lies firstly with the proliferation of food labels such as best before, or best if used by, or expires on, or use by, or best by, or enjoy by dates. Most of these labels refer to quality, consumed by this date for optimal quality and taste, rather than a clear unsafe to eat date, with many consumers confusing the two. Consumers are also misled by labeling intended to inform retailers, such as display until dates or sell by dates. R.E. Fed notes that date labels are almost entirely unregulated by federal law, and states have filled the void with a wide variety of regulations. Usually state regulations fail to make a clear distinction between the labeling of food safety and food quality. The disposal of hundreds of thousands of tons of wholesome food each year has led to the rise of a phenomenon called freegans, otherwise known as dumpster divers or urban scavengers, who rummage through garbage to reclaim discarded yet near-perfect goods, including food. The impact of label standardization. Standardizing label dates nationally has the potential to divert more than 398,000 tons of food waste per year. Ianas urged the food industry to strip labeling back to two clear labels: best if used by, to indicate that the product may not taste or perform as expected after a specified date, but is safe to use or consumed, or use by for perishable products that should be consumed by the date on the package and discarded after that date for food safety reasons. Research from the Grocery Manufacturers Association found that 88% of surveyed consumers said these two streamlined product date labels were clear to them, while 85% said they were helpful. Hopefully this will translate into fewer goods in the period between best by and use by ending up in the garbage. Well, I don't know if any label standardization is going to make a whole lot of difference, because people are usually going to wind up letting their food sit until it actually goes bad. That's the problem that I've found. It's possible people will throw away food when it's past the use by date. I know a lot of people who do. They go by the expiration date on the cans, and I've been confused by it myself. But when it comes to eating a diet like Lion Diet, I really don't have much problem with that, because as long as I freeze the meat, it's going to stay good until I'm ready to eat it, for the most part, if it's a good freezer. But I'm still just flabbergasted by the idea that we throw away $2.8 billion worth of food every year. It seems like we're not saving anything by cheapening the quality of our food. All it's done is made us feel like our food is not of value. It's so cheap and so readily available that we can eat it or we can throw it away. And that's pretty pitiful, because I know what it's like to feel that way. I know what it's like to feel like, well, we didn't eat this in time or whatever, and I would always be bothered by throwing food out. But now, I would be upset. I would be really upset if I had to throw some meat out. So to me, this is just an interesting article that helps us to realize where we are as a people, that we're not putting enough value in the food that we do have, and being thankful to have the food that we do have. If things keep going like they are, there may be a day that comes that we wish we had every bit of that food that we had to throw away. Alright, this next one I want to talk about is called From Alpaca to Crocodile. This startup is serving up the next big thing in lab-grown meat.
As many consumers trend towards cutting meat consumption due to moral or sustainability reasons, plant-based protein sources have emerged as a clear leader in meat's successor. But some companies believe that consumers might be able to address these same issues by replacing meat with other meat. Allow us to explain. Lab-cultivated meat creators use bioengineering practices to grow meat in a clean room environment using cells harvested from living animals. And while the technology is still in the development stage, one company believes it's already found a way to add new and better forms of meat to the mix. The startup Vow Food believes that there's an opportunity to explore new and unconventional forms of meat that aren't currently being consumed consistently. According to George Pepot, Vow's founder and CEO, these new types of meat, quote, are going to become as abundant, well-recognized, and well understood as a Cheerio is 80 years in the future. So what does this look like? Vow currently has a quail-type product it has cultivated in a lab and dubbed Morsel that is being reviewed by regulators. The company hopes to add more adventurous types because Pepot believes that consumers will adapt to the lab meat concept only if they're getting something they don't already have, creating a notion, he says, that cultured meat can be something that animal meat isn't. On the table are products that mix and match animal biologies, something unattainable in the traditional meat industry, and Vow is now experimenting with more than 20 species, which include alpaca and crocodile. Vow hopes consumers will be on board if they take a more novel approach. At stake are potentially billions of animals who are slaughtered each year for consumption. Not to mention, global livestock operations are responsible for nearly 15% of greenhouse gas emissions.
All right, well, that wasn't very appetizing, at least for me. I don't know what you thought of that, but this whole thing with the bugs and now the lab-grown meat, I just... Their comparison to it being like Cheerios 80 years from now was probably apropos, because Cheerios are horrible for you too. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly how it plays out, because this is not going to be good. This one drives me a little nuts. When I drive around and I see all the cow pastures around here, right where I'm at in Dunnellon, Florida area, it's amazing how many cows are in this small little area. And then when I drive through the countryside in Georgia and Tennessee and other states around here, there's massive amounts of area that are perfect for grazing land that I don't see cows on. To hear people say that it's not sustainable to have that much meat, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. I believe that it can be done, that if it was incentivized the right way, or rather if meat wasn't incentivized in the way that it is by government forces and other things that manipulate the market, we would actually have a thriving meat industry, because people would want to be able to get their meat to market and be able to make a profit on it. So I just don't believe that it can't be done. I don't think it can be done in a regulated market like a socialist market, but it can certainly be done in a free market. It has been proven to be the way to lift us up out of the mire and the muck of the world, is to stick with the free market, not to stick with all the cronyism and where these large corporations buy influence through lobbyists and other things like that. It would make a lot more sense to get government to stop incentivizing some things and de-incentivizing other things, because what happens is the larger companies take full advantage of all the benefits and the smaller companies can't make enough to make it worthwhile. It's very frustrating. It's frustrating to hear that these are the solutions they want to come up with, rather than something like moving toward a more sustainable type of agriculture that guys like Big Mo up in Big Mo's Cattle, who I've talked about before. I did a whole video on grass-fed, grass-finished beef and how he does regenerative ranching up in Dixie, Georgia, and how you can get your cows there, and your cows are going to be clean compared to the stuff, because they're not going to have antibiotics injected in them, because they've been getting all kind of sickness from eating the grass all the way down to the roots and getting the bug larvae and things inside of them, because they're eating the top of the grass and they're moving on. They're not staying in a field so long that they're having to eat poop along with their grass. That the animals that come in afterward that root through the poop and spread everything around, and then the chickens come through and eat all the bugs and scratch things around even more, that just makes the land ready again for the next time the cows come back around to that paddock of land in about 30 or 45 days, that keeps it healthy, that they're not using pesticides on the lands, they're using Redmond salt on the land, so that they can actually give the cows what they need. They use bentonite clay that helps the cows to be able to have a better digestive system and to be better for them in general, better for you. It can be done, and profit can be made, and they can sell the beef at a reasonable price. So if it can be done now, it can be done with more competition. There is no excuse for not having us look closer in to regenerative farming practices and breaking away from the big four meat processors and doing it the way so many cattle farmers do, with just shoving them full of grain, shoving them full of antibiotics, and doing everything they can to fatten the cows up and fill them up with water and do all these crazy things to come up with the weight. And if they are cheating a system in a day and age when we have as much information as we have, there should be people out there reporting, this was my experience with the meat, this is what I found out. And there could be individual testing companies that would help support this. Certainly lawyers would get involved. I mean, there's all kind of ways that this can be enforced and done within a free market without having the government come up with ideas and push crazy scientific plans to do things to where we're going to have a food supply that is completely unnatural. That's the way we're going, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I know I got on my soapbox on that one, so forgive me. Well, this next one doesn't do me a whole lot of better for my blood pressure than the last one did. This next one is called, Can We Change Plant DNA to Reduce Carbon Emissions? You know, the first thing that comes to mind is Dr. Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, pointing out to them that you stood on the shoulders of geniuses, and before you even knew what you had a brand on it, you patented it, and you were selling it. You want to sell it. This is exactly what I hear, is that they want to be able to come up with new ways to sell something that they shouldn't even be doing, but they're doing because of all the power politics behind the whole climate change movement. Over the last decade, the topic of climate change has been top of mind for business leaders, elected officials, and everyday people alike. First sentence is a lie. And while opinions about carbon emissions levels and climate change vary, many agree that solving these global challenges will require a multifaceted approach. Many are wrong about some of the approaches we're taking. There are ways to do things that are good for the environment, but about 99% of this has nothing to do with something good for the environment. It all has to do with power agendas, and that's what grinds my gears. We talk with this flowery language, but it's not what it really is. Of the many promising solutions that have been proposed, one of the most appealing involves altering the DNA of plants to reduce carbon emissions, but exactly how viable is this proposed solution? Altering the DNA of plants? Are you going to alter the DNA of all the plants? Are you going to actually taint everything on the planet? Is that the plan? Is to just to fiddle with the basic building blocks of everything in nature until everything is a Frankenstein? A potential secret weapon to fight and reduce carbon emissions. I'm going to get through it. Don't worry. As part of the push to stifle climate change, some have suggested that creating massive skyscraper-esque direct air capture plants is the most viable solution. There are currently 19 such plants in operation around the globe, each of which is capable of capturing millions of tons of carbon dioxide per year. The downside is that building a single plant costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And you don't see any potential for there to be... I won't even get into it. While these factories certainly have a role to play in the push forward towards net zero emissions, high costs and long construction times will negatively impact the efficiency of this carbon sequestration strategy. Fortunately, genetically modifying plants appears to not only be a viable solution, but may also be far more cost effective than constructing artificial carbon harvesting systems. Plants already harvest carbon via photosynthesis and sequester it in the soil. By creating genetically modified plants, researchers hope to increase the carbon capture capacity of plants. Additionally, researchers want to engineer plants to grow longer roots so that they can deposit carbon deeper into the soil. If scientists could increase plants' carbon capture capacity by just twofold, they could significantly reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and reduce carbon emissions. While it is too early to tell if genetically modified plants are the most viable method for combating climate change, the initial outlook is extremely positive. I don't know, y'all. It sounds to me like we are playing with stuff we shouldn't be playing with. That we are playing God with our bodies, with our food, with our minds. And this is really this Thomas Industry Update talks about a lot of the things that do wind up being the next thing. So this is serious. This isn't like conspiracy theory stuff. This isn't some random site that gives me some information that I'm just going wild with. This to me is concerning, because we have a very flippant attitude about what it means to change the natural order of things and not expect to see unintended consequences. And some of those unintended consequences can be very devastating. So, and they're in a lot of cases not going to be reversible. So, I don't know. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread.
Well, that's going to do it for me today, guys. I'm sorry to not have great positive things to bring you today, but it's important for us to look at some of the important details of what's going on in the food industry, because it is going to affect all of us, and especially carnivores, because all of this net zero nonsense is pushing us in a direction that none of us are going to want to go. It's really not looking good. It just seems like we have a recipe for insanity right now, and we're implementing it as fast as we can. So all I can tell you is get prepared. Get yourself healthy, physically, mentally, and especially spiritually. With all this insanity going on, you're going to need it. But it can be done, and we can get through this, and we can get through it together. I want you to say, screw it, I'm going to get up and do it. I'm not going to let any of this stuff stop me from achieving what I want to achieve with my body, with my mind. I'm going to make sure that I'm putting the right foods in my body and exercising so that I can be strong enough to take care of my family, my friends, and myself when the time comes, and hopefully I'll be able to help you out too, as part of the community that we all need to be a part of. And that's the civilized world we all want to live in. I'll see you next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?